Spider-Man 2, directed once again by Sam Raimi, brings back the cast of the original. Tobey Maguire comes back as Peter Parker. You have James Franco back as Harry Osborn. Kirsten Dunst is back as Mary Jane, and this is the continuation of the story that was brought 2 years before. As mentioned, this is 2 years after the events of the first movie, and it shows Peter Parker out of, the life of a teenager and more of an adult. So now he has to worry about life problems such as getting a job, being on time for that job, making money for an apartment, while also dealing with the problems of being Spider-Man. While struggling with his life as being Spider-Man, he also is having a really tough love triangle-esque situation of Mary Jane Watson in love with J. Jonah Jameson's son, and then you have Harry Osborn still tormented by his father's death that he blames on Spider-Man. Little does he know that Peter Parker is actually Spider-Man, so this eats away at Peter for the entire movie. And on top of all that, Alfred Molina plays Dr. Otto Octavius, and now he has a science project gone wrong where he tries to harness the power of a self-sufficient sun, and that ends up killing his wife, and then melting these metal arms to his spine, and then begin to talk to him and brainwash him and think that he's the good guy in this and that she should continue with this project. Well, he's also hurting a lot of people, so that's a big issue that Spidey's got to handle. To start off with this movie, this is probably the best Spider-Man movie, or at least one of them, on script. I personally enjoy the first movie a lot more than this one. I think it's paced a lot better, but the first movie is a lot different from this movie. Spider-Man 2 is more of a character study, and it does a really good job with doing slow burn storytelling and trying to get these characters in certain spots and progress the story with more character development rather than just Spider-Man thwip, So I can respect the movie for what it is, and I can genuinely say that probably this is a better movie than the first Spider-Man movie, but the first one's still probably my favorite of the trilogy. And while I'll say this story does tend to have Peter Parker kind of get shit on for the majority of the movie, this is an important element to the character that kind of is done wrong later on in a lot of other movies. But the problem with this movie, I feel like sometimes, is that it takes it a little too far, especially with Mary Jane Watson. Mary Jane Watson is a complete bitch in this movie. I don't really like her character a lot of the times in certain aspects where she has to be mean to Peter, but then she's overly mean to Peter, and then she's kind of like flirting, teasing with him, but then she's like, haha, guess what? I got a husband now, or I'm at least engaged, so suck it, bro. But this also does lend itself to being a lot funnier than the first movie, which is something that I enjoy a little bit more than the first one. Obviously, I do love the first one and its jokes, and I do love Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin and the hilarity that ensues because Willem Dafoe is just amazing. But the script does tend to have a lot of better comedic moments that are specifically supposed to be comedic moments, rather than just me being like, wow, Willem Dafoe is kind of ridiculous right now, or that just happened and it's kind of ridiculous. Obviously, one of the funniest aspects in this movie is J.K. Simmons. I think J.K. Simmons knocks it out of the park way better than the first movie. It is so funny when he's like, oh, Miss Brandt, give me a violin, and then he's like capped off this one scene after firing Peter and then unfiring him and wanting certain photos, and then he's asked to be paid in it, or Peter asked to be paid in advance for the party, and it's capped off with the greatest laugh and cut off of a laugh I've ever seen in my life.
You serious? Pay you for what? Standing there? The planetarium tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. There's the door.
And while one thing I will say about this movie that is very comparable to the first one, and you can flip-flop between the two, Alfred Molina's portrayal as Doc Ock is amazing. The character is there, and it's so compelling, and you can understand why he is the way he is. But then the arms corrupt him, and what I do love about this movie with Doc Ock and the arms that he has is that he has a chip that is supposed to have his mind be superior to the AI that is being, used for the arms on this project. And once that's broken, they start to whisper to him in his head, and while you never explicitly hear anything other than a couple of like hissing noises from the machines itself when Doc Ock is talking to the arms, you can definitely see the wheels turning in his head, and you could see the arms kind of shaking in the background and being like, yes, we're manipulating this guy, sort of thing. And it's great subtle stuff like that that really draws me into the movie. Harry Osborn also has a bigger role in this movie compared to the first movie. He obviously should. His father was, killed by Spider-Man in the middle of the night, or at least he, assumes that's what happened. And because Peter takes photos of him, he takes every chance he gets to completely shit on him for that. And this kind of lends itself to one of the better scenes in the movie, or at least personally for me that I feel, is when Harry is drunk at this party that is celebrating J.K. Simmons' son, the astronaut, and he becomes drunk in rage, and then he starts slapping Peter, and he's like, mad at him for supporting Spider-Man in a way when really he should be supporting Harry. And on a technical level, I think this movie is kind of shot a little bit better at times, or at least you get better moments with characters and certain elements of the plot. Obviously, the train sequence is one of the greatest fight scenes in superhero history, for movies at least. As I mentioned before, I get chills about certain things in movies when I reminisce about it, or other aspects of life. And watching the train sequence come out, in full after Peter, once he gets rid of the suit and then he brings the suit back because now he has to save Mary Jane, watching him put it back on and then fight Doc Ock on the train is literally amazing. The train sequence is one of the greatest fights in a superhero movie ever. There's really not a lot of problems with it at all, and the shots that are used and how Peter keeps getting knocked back but fights back and then stopping the train, and then the symbolism with New York, and it's just that scene alone, like, it's everything. It's everything that Spider-Man should be. And also the CGI is actually slightly better than the first one, but that, comes with, time. But all in all, this movie is an improvement over it, and you can flip-flop between the first two movies and which you like better. But this is definitely one of the cornerstones of a superhero movie, like, edged in Mount Rushmore. Like, it's one of the classics. You can't really mess it up, and it's forever edged in history as one of the best. The way they ended off, too, is also very good, because now that they have set up Harry, realizing that, Peter is now Spider-Man, then he has a talk with his father in his own vision, and he finds all the tech from the Green Goblin stuff. It sets up the next villain, or at least it's supposed to set up the next villain for the next movie. And then you also get the lasting shot of Mary Jane leaving her wedding and then going with Peter. And then once Peter hears the sirens, he has to leave and be Spider-Man. And there's a great lasting shot of MJ looking out into the city and being like, there he goes. And then it becomes sad, and it's a bit of a cliffhanger, but a lot of movies have great cliffhangers, and I think this is one of the better, maybe not the better ones, but this is definitely a good cliffhanger to be like, so she realizes that this is going to be a regular thing, and that this isn't going to be just a one-off thing, which then later sets up for Spider-Man 3, and then what would have been Spider-Man 4, but plans fall through, obviously, for certain reasons. I'm going to give Spider-Man 2 5 stars. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to wrap up the Sam Raimi trilogy very soon, and that is going to be a fun review, hopefully. And just hold on to your seats, because that one's going to be fun to talk about.